Today, I'm interviewing attorney Rick Collins, who is a friend of mine. Okay, what are your thoughts on this movement today to declassify or reclassify testosterone? Is it for us, for the 99.9% of men that are just regular guys that are on TRT? Let's go.
The answer is no. That's not really where it's coming from. Although if it were to happen, then that population would potentially benefit from it because you'd have greater access to testosterone in a medical context, which might be good for some guys who are hypogonadal or might need
Absolutely.
it. But I think what you're referring to is, and I was kind of surprised because if anybody had asked me, and people have asked me through the years, Rick, are steroids ever going to become legal, and will they ever allow, declassify them from Schedule 3 to like a prescription drug like antibiotics, which they're like in other countries, right? I mean,
Mexico, right?
Sure,
Over the counter.
Sure, yeah, there's over the counter, or at a minimum that a doctor could prescribe them for whatever purpose. So that's not true here. Again, anabolic steroids are Schedule 3 drugs in the U.S., which means they're a controlled substance under DEA watch. So I would have probably said, I don't see it happening because of the sort of the forces that caused it to be scheduled in the first place. So I was surprised when a couple of years ago, I started seeing these, and this is a new social movement, really the last 5 years that's gained enormous traction and clout, and that is the trans community.
Right.
So you've got people who were born female, assigned female at birth, who are looking to become either men or simply more masculine along a spectrum, a non-binary spectrum, to add up more physical attributes of masculinity and yet still not be a man. And I read a few articles, one of which was by a person who had been born female and who was not looking to be a man, but was looking for a squarer jaw, looking for facial hair, looking for broader shoulders, because that's the way this person would feel more comfortable.
The male
in their
secondary
own body.
sex characteristics,
Yes,
androgen.
Yes, and that the status of testosterone as a controlled substance was impeding the ability to get prescribed, and Schedule 3, there's more reporting, more recording. It's not like a average prescription drug, and so
like estrogen,
interestingly. So this person was like, we need to move to take testosterone out of the controlled substance status because it is discriminatory against the LGBT community.
Right.
And so I started reading these articles about that, and it was surprising. So I had never seen a lobbying effort to try to declassify testosterone before, and it started to get successful. So you've got the 2 U.S. senators in Massachusetts who actually wrote a letter to the Biden administration recently urging the Biden administration to support the declassification of anabolic steroids, specifically testosterone, from controlled substance status. And that's, unbelievable. Now, this was all tied into not the hypogonadal male, not your population, not your viewers.
Not my guys.
Not your guys.
But I'm not against anyone.
But
it's
if testosterone were to be declassified or taken from Schedule 3 to 5 or taken off, then if it were to be done in a way that applies to everybody, and I'm not sure you could do it in a way that wouldn't be discriminatory to make it selective. Right. But
can you imagine?
It would have an effect on.
Could you imagine? What's the number? I think we know the number. It's a small number, but as far as the population, demographic, however, the political power is just an absolute, and because men are so damn quiet, which is bad, but it's the nature of the beast.
Right. Well, men are also. I think there's a, and I've talked about this in other podcasts. There's kind of a devaluation of masculinity and men just generally.
Right.
It's I think as we've become, and certainly I'm all in favor of women becoming empowered in the workplace and higher levels of equality in pay and things like that.
Right.
But there is a downside that appears to have happened, which is that kind of men have been devalued. Traditional masculinity. You may have heard just 3 years ago or so, the American Psychological Association actually came out with a position statement saying that traditional masculinity is toxic.
Absolutely.
That it is,
unbelievable.
Not a good thing.
Unbelievable.
Kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Men sit here quietly on this.
Right. The resiliency, the protective aspects.
Because we can't, because we're aggressive. So, okay. Do you think this law is going to come into play? Do you think?
It's a good question. I guess it depends on how the political winds continue to blow, because there certainly is a growing movement for anti-LGBT discrimination policies. And this is being, the status of testosterone as a controlled substance, even though the reasons it's a controlled substance have nothing to do whatsoever with the LGBT community. Nevertheless, the effect of it now is upon that community, or at least that's what's being presented as the main issue of testosterone.
So it could happen that in the next year, maybe 3 years, politically, that testosterone's going to come off the control, is already looking
it's
like
theoretically possible. I wouldn't hold your breath.
Wow.
I wouldn't hold your breath. And the reason I'd say that it kind of goes back to what you had mentioned before, and that is comparing testosterone and estrogen. Why is testosterone a Schedule III drug, but estrogen is not?
Well, I've listened to your podcast. It's not for a medical danger, because estrogens for women can cause DVTs and all sorts of side effects and problems, breast cancer and all these. You could just read it. Now, with men, testosterone may be actually safer to some degree. We just got a blessing on cardiovascular safety, which is actually interesting, only on gel and men that have cardiac disease and they're being treated for their ABCDs. So, and if you look for
they're being treated for less than 300 now.
Right, and it's just
very low levels.
It's not going to be giving a blessing that testosterone is actually safe for the heart. It just, on this study that was done on gel, prospectively though, and these were cardiac patients, so they're all being treated with cardiac preventive meds. And Dr. Nissen, who I'm so fortunate that responded to an email of me, he can't interview with me because it's just, I'm too controversial, but I was so humble, and I will put that on my wall, Dr. Steve Nissen. So he's the chief and he's a good guy. So he basically said that be careful in the caveat of this. But who's listening to that? No, they just see that look at this, it's safe. Hey mom, safe man, it's safe for my heart, which oh my God, it potentially isn't. So with that and the politics, testosterone, and this will be, I think it's good. If it's high. I just want people to have more access to things. And you do your own ABCDs with me on my app.
Sure.
It is what it is. So, because the truth is what you need. You take anything, any medicine, if you're hypertensive, that's going to end up bad for you with your brain, with strokes and heart attacks, not to mention testosterone and steroids.
Plus the devil is in the dose very often.
It's all in the person. Yes. In the person. So, but what's going to happen on this?
So, when we say estrogen and testosterone, what's the difference? What is the difference between those two things that would create a model of prohibition for one, controlled substance status, but not for the other?
Tell us.
And the answer is, one makes you run faster, jump higher, hit the ball further, tackle harder, get bigger, stronger, faster. That's really what it all comes down to. And you kind of alluded to it before when you said that the medical risks, while they're always a concern, certainly, and I'm sure Congress was concerned about it, having read the transcripts of the hearings in the late 1980s that preceded the change in the law that made testosterone and anabolic steroids into a controlled substance. But the main focus This was the aftermath of the 1988 Seoul Olympics,
Right.
where Ben Johnson,
Right.
Canadian sprinter, ran the 100 meters, beat Carl Lewis, the American, right? And then tested positive for Winstrol. And everybody went crazy. And suddenly, including the sports media and Congress, that said, well, is this going to become a chemical contest? Is this Canadian beat our guy because he's juicing? We need to do something about this. And because androgens are anabolic, they're the ones
so
that got tagged.
It's 100% because of a PED, not because of danger, because estrogen could be just as dangerous, more dangerous for hypercoagulable states, potentially, and cardiac disease for women. You could just see it.
Right.
So now they just gave a blessing to.
So it's really the sports application.
So
and
right.
you know, the idea that there's a potential for abuse and dependency.
That is correct,
because of the effects of making you stronger,
the high,
and
the shutdown.
You're looking in the mirror, and suddenly you've got an extra inch on your arms, and so you're going to be more likely. Whereas with estrogen, the view is nobody's going to be. You're less likely to get dependent on it.
But when the law went through in 1990, they didn't know this.
Yeah, they speculated about it. There wasn't a lot of good evidence at all.
Right. It's all evidence based.
They wanted to get it out of sports. But let's face it.
Right.
Congress's view was, we got steroids, we want to get it out of sports. Testing isn't sufficient. There was testing in the sports, but it wasn't enough. So let's just make it controlled and we'll get rid of the
But they can
problem.
keep it out of sports. I always say when someone comes to me, and if they're a professional athlete, I'm very clear. You're cheating. It's on a banned list.
Right.
And then I have a regular guy. The vast majority of steroid users, we all know this now from the data, 99.9% are regular guys for personal use, including women. And they're going to suffer. Right. Yeah. So I have to do a harm reduction, and then I have a medical legal issue if I have a guy cheating. And I don't cross the line. There's no, hey, let me give you a therapeutic use exemption, which I've run a few for some like biking guys who are running. And I say to them, sir, you're really, just tell them you're on testosterone, and we'll give a therapeutic use because you need it. And it either goes through or it doesn't because you're in a little amateur organization. Mm-hmm. This is not MMA. That's a whole other story. So, okay.
Where it may have more of a damaging effect because of being able to hit that much harder.
There's no question. And I've seen some of these guys. I've taken care of some of these guys, and we all know that there's 100%. A lot of drugs and PEDs being used, and the testing is just sometimes plugged into a Coke machine.
Yes.
So it's a joke. So okay, last question. What do you think about what's going on in the medical world, in the bodybuilding world, with all the medical issues? And I could say it myself that with COVID and the vaccine, there's going to be some interplay, guys. Okay. But as a physician, I'm not going to sit here and go anything more than that. I just don't feel comfortable. So, but when it comes to the deaths, and even from guys well before COVID, that we know that bodybuilders don't die from brain cancer, Lyle Alzado. They don't even die from prostate cancer with the grace of God. Right. They die from hypercoagulable states, pulmonary embolisms, heart attacks, and kidney disease. End-stage kidney disease. It's so sad.
Sometimes related to diuretics.
Right. But just the whole milieu.
Yes.
But in this world that you and I are part of, we have to be careful. We are the leaders in this world, medical, legal leaders. There's more being used. It's extreme. The Romans. People love the bread and circus. It's never going to change. Right. Forget the legal. Is it cheating? Are you signing this and you're a fake natty? You're a natty. What about the extreme use of PEDs in the competition sports, bodybuilding, strongman, and powerlifting? All the other sports are drug tested. They're as natty as they possibly can be. Come on.
Right.
What about this? Do we have any obligation legally to protect?
Well, first, when you say as they possibly as they can be, you look at something like Lance Armstrong and
I
so
agree.
many other. I mean, look.
But Lance's arms were like little pipes.
So how prevalent are performance-enhancing drugs in sports that are tested? So is the
I know they're
working?
there. I know it's there.
Yeah. So and to what degree?
MLB and all this, we could talk.
Correct.
And can they really test for growth hormone? We don't need to.
There's all sorts of issues with testing. So I'm not sure that that's necessarily the answer. And I'm not sure that we can even blame competition, because, without naming names, you and I were on Instagram or on social media. We've seen the dead pool of folks in the fitness industry who died recently. Some of them were retired competitors who haven't competed in 10 years or more, and aren't certainly
maybe
not
on tier T only,
maybe only that. I mean, so what is this, cumulative
I do
damage?
agree.
Or
I do agree.
You would know more than I, but it's not just the folks who are competing. Plus, some of the biggest celebrated fitness folks who've died over the last 10 years, some of them were huge bodybuilders, some of them were just ripped, shredded folks. Many of them were not competing at all. Some of them had either given up competing or were never competing. So I don't know if we can even blame the sports themselves. The question is, what are these people doing, and why is it just our perception that there's been this great increase in deaths that are related to what would appear to be PEDs, but are in a population of folks that are hypermuscular and hyper ripped,
taking some risks.
So I don't know what the answers are. What I do think, though, is that, like you said, the market dictates, right? So if the Roman spectators want to see blood in the arena, they want to see folks, and it's true in baseball too. They want to see the ball go over the fence, right? They're less. Some people are purists, but others don't care how the ball gets over the fence. They want to see more home runs. They don't care how that guy got up on a stage. They want to see a level of definition, of striations, of muscle separation, of balloon muscles with tiny joints that they've never seen
We're
before.
designed for adrenaline. We like to see it.
So as long as that continues, there's going to be the drive for it. I do think that something like the popularity of classic physique is a step in the right direction. I think that a more toned down, more aesthetic, more traditional kind of look. I mean, we grew up in the 80s, right? I mean, we
remember those guys?
We look back at guys like Rory Liedlmeyer, or back certainly even guys like Danny Padilla, and some of the top guys.
Frank Zane back in the day.
Sure, Bob Birdsong. I mean, you could look at many guys who had various, even Bob Paris, later on, who were aesthetic physiques, tight waists, could maybe even do a vacuum still. Those kind of physiques, and so now you got a guy like Chris Bumstead who, has a more traditional, aesthetic, classic kind of physique. And does that mean less risk, less pushing the envelope? I don't know.
And then the unfortunate side of the theory or the number of competitors that don't have the genes and that are competing in these other board shorts. Again, I'm a powerlifter. Different lower classes than men's open, and they're using more drugs, ironically, than the guys in the open.
I've probably represented more folks, bodybuilders and other people, on steroid criminal cases than any other lawyer on the planet, and more than most lawyers combined.
Wow.
And so I've seen it all. And I have had clients who were very, very heavy steroid users who, when I look at him, he's got maybe a 16-inch arm and he's been using steroids forever, and he's visually showing all of the indications of too much, right? All of the negative adverse effects that might be associated with androgens, but not really getting the full effect of it, even though he was very knowledgeable, and so genetics play a role.
It's primary.
If you don't have the genetics for that kind of hypertrophy, or even the genetics to respond to the drugs themselves, you're winding up ultimately poisoning yourself with a lot of stuff that you shouldn't be taking.
I think I'd like to do a podcast series with Rick Collins.
There you go. Wow.
Because we could go on forever.
Yeah, we could keep talking. There's so much stuff we haven't covered yet that we could in future podcasts and future episodes. But I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today.
Anything, as they say, anything you'd like to close us with, and contacts for you and your social media, platforms.
So if people have enjoyed this little chat we've had, we can do it again, most certainly. If they want to find me in the interim, I'm easy to find. You can go to rickcollins.com on the internet, and that kind of talks about my federal cases and the kind of work I do. Most of my clients are in the bodybuilding community or the health and fitness community. So if you've got a legal problem in that space, if you're in that community, certainly feel free to reach out to me. I'm easy to find. My partners do other types of legal work besides what I do. So if you need a lawyer, I'm licensed in New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, DC, Texas. So, so I'm happy to help. And if I don't do what you need, I typically know a lawyer somewhere in this great 50 states of America that can help
connections.
You and I are both active on social media. I'm at Rick Collins ESQ on Instagram, and I try to put information if I see a new study, if I see a new legal precedent, something that's important for the community.
I love your posts.
I try to, and I put some personal.
I get
stuff.
nervous sometimes though.
And I try to put some personal stuff up, some old pictures and some of my various exploits. And if I have a legal case that I think was important to share, I'll share that there too. So I love making good connections with new people. I love what I do, Tom. I'm like you. I'm very blessed. I grew up as a kid, looking at Arnold and all the stars of the 70s, Franco and Zane and, Boyer Coe and, everybody. And so for me to now be involved in bodybuilding the way that I am, I'm just grateful. I've gotten to spend, I had Sylvester Stallone's nutrition company as a client when he had InStone Nutrition. I've gotten to spend time with Arnold Schwarzenegger, both before and after he was governor of California. Just great experiences. I've represented many pro bodybuilders and also many people just from ordinary, walks of life.
It keeps us humble as regular guys.
Absolutely.
When you hit the gym hard, you're always going to be a regular guy.
100%. So I'm blessed. Thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you so much, Rick. Follow this guy.